Hello there, friends, and welcome back to Axie Tuesday. We've got another great community spotlight today, a one-on-one conversation with the myth, the man, the legend, Mr. Mystic himself. He's involved with the Proof of Game group, POG. You've probably heard of them. They're a popular group, a group. Why do I keep saying that? A guild within the Axie space and more. I'm very excited to pick his brain about everything they've been working on, their style of community building, and of course, his origin story. I also had the pleasure of meeting him in real life at, was it the LA meetup? Was it the Miami meetup? Was it both?
Both
Both.
NYC NFT in Miami. Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, sorry. All those events have kind of blurred together now into one giant Axie community meetup. But either way, it's a pleasure to talk to you again, my friend. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me, Zyori. Such a pleasure. The previous fireside chat was awesome. Looking forward to today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun to make a lot more content and be able to tap into some of these Axie channels and spotlight community members such as yourselves. So I'm curious, like where was your starting point? How long have you been in the Axie community? Give us the origin story of Mystic. I also want to know where this name came from as well, because you are a Mystic holder, right? I mean, this.
So we'll leave the origin story of the name for the end, I guess, of
Okay.
this origin story. So in June, came into Axie Infinity, was super attracted to just the concept of player-owned property rights and this like community-owned digital economy. Was totally a novel concept for me to wrap my head around, and it was actually my gateway into NFTs in general. Before I was actually NFT adverse, right? I was crypto like a relatively early crypto adopter, but it wasn't until Axie showed these different use cases for NFTs that really got me excited. And so as for the name Mystic, I was looking at the Mystic prices at the time in June. I was like, wow, that's intense. But if I can't get a Mystic right now, maybe my scholars can all be Mystic. And so I named my initial brand Mystic Scholars. But I'm not too worried because I think 2022 will be a good year for me to acquire one.
I like it. Okay. Very cool. You're definitely right. I mean, I had a similar thought when I first looked at Mystic prices. They always felt just a little bit ahead of where the rest of the space was, and like even if you believed, still a big investment to make in one go. But when you say like Axie is what brought you into the NFT space, kind of opened your mind to it. Is it the utility aspect? Is it this idea of okay, it's more than just a JPEG? Did you have that aha moment, or was it something different?
Yeah, it's just their viewpoint on like digital verifiable ownership. I think the fact that you can assign property right, that gamers could have rights in the games they play, was just totally different than what the rest of the industry was looking at, right? And the profile picture kind of space. And so to see that kind of innovation happening for years before I entered just showed me how far ahead of the game they were. So just like that, I think my trust in the leadership really was established early on.
Okay, that's great. And now, what about land? Are you holding any land? Is that like I'm talking about personal bags here? I always assume
Yeah,
guilds have some sort of a land play, but
yeah, super excited about land. I got my first land back in July, so almost one of the first like assets I bought in the game after Axies themselves, and just recently purchased a roadside Arctic plot, which I'm super excited about, and that's
whoa,
inside the interior. So love that.
I like that. Okay,
Yeah.
very nice. Um, so talk to me about proof of game a little bit. I want to know about like your specific role within it, and I also want to know about the vision, because there's a lot of different guilds out there. There's actually a lot of different models and takes on how folks are expanding, and especially in this current moment where we're experiencing a bit more of a bearish kind of market, it is testing some of the business models of these guilds that started more so in like the bull market towards the end of last year. So a lot to navigate there, and I'm really curious to hear how you guys are doing it. Maybe a good starting point is just give us the basics, like how big are we talking? How many scholars have you guys got?
Sure. So Proof of Game right now has 700, but we're actually in talks with another household guild right now, hashtag leaks, to maybe even merge with them. And so they're very value aligned with us. So with that, it'll be putting us to closer to 1,300 total community members in our program.
Wow,
Um,
dude,
yeah,
that's an unbelievable amount. I mean, how do you manage that? That's so many. That's a lot of people. I mean, I know YGG is bigger and people do it, but like, how do you scale that operation?
So it's twofold. I think creative community design definitely helps that. So enabling self-identified community leaders to help kind of scale the business in that aspect in a similar way that Sky Mavis looks at the community, the Axie Infinity community is really important. And then, great technology that helps the education, onboarding, management process. So yeah, it's great stuff.
Okay, so is it like, I guess it's not quite representative democracy when you say self-appointed. How does that work? Is surely
Sure.
there's some credential check or some. It
Mhm.
takes more than just putting your hand in the air and saying I'd like to do it, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, it starts with that. And then I
Okay.
guess through kind of reputation building and trust building over time, participating in different kinds of initiatives and being able to kind of consistently have a voice that's aligned with the POG ethos and being just an all around great community member is kind of how we we help identify these folks, right? And I think the key here is to create really a lot of opportunities for these community members to participate in. So that way, there's just more and more chances for these people to shoot their shot and get ownership in the projects and games they participate in. So
Wow. That's a large community you've got there. That's pretty amazing. Talk to me
yeah.
about the ethos, though. You specifically mentioned the POG ethos. What
Mhm.
does that entail? How does it differ from the other guilds out there?
Well, I guess we look at Web3 in general and like Axie as almost like the conduit to Web3 as a way for us to almost expand the human potential, right? We look at this concept of a community creator, a community owned creator economy, and we really want to double down on what this means. So this just doesn't mean like only playing the game and winning battles and earning SLP. It's enabling people to really exercise their creative sphere of influence, to expand their transferable skills and their vocational skill to kind of co-create alongside our company. So with that, they have shared resources with the stuff that we participate in. A lot of the times, it means just creating projects for people to uh, just take on, and us just stepping away and saying, "Hey, like this is your project now. Take it in the direction that you want to take it." And this coupled with financial incentives and other kind of status and access really creates just profound results. So
Interesting. So
yeah.
I guess the model is built around, I love that. Axie as a conduit, and then you develop education and other skills within that, and then the community is able to develop sort of a foundation that isn't reliant on any one game, but very much attached to this one game that kind of enables this funnel to start in the first place, right?
Yeah, yeah. So like we look at like, just historically speaking, Axie onboarded millions of people onto Web3. And so we look at that process with a lot of attention, right? Because this onboarding process, they'll need the infrastructure, they'll need the content, they'll need these incentives that are sustainable to help them throughout their Web3 journey. And I think being a positive, educational, consistent voice in the community, enabling these people to trust someone and learning about these new ideas like liquidity providing or what does it mean to work alongside Sky Mavis as a community member? Being involved and tapped into those kind of ideas is super important. So we try to like basically Sherpa our community through co-creation for value creation and value capture as well. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I heard somebody. I don't know if this was actually executed, but it was sort of a vision. I think for Nepal or somewhere like that, where educate access to quality education is definitely a big value add for that specific location. And the idea was you take a scholarship, then you use the scholarship to cover basic necessities, and then you put them in sort of like a boot camp type thing to learn either creative, like Photoshop type skills, or video editing, or animation, or 3D modeling, or anything at writing, I guess, if they wanted to do that. Anything kind of in that sphere that is transferable, remote, and in demand in this budding Web3 economy, right? Like 3D modeling is transferable across any language, any culture, any starting point, right? It's a skill that if you have the tools, AKA a computer or a tablet, I guess, and then the training, you can produce things that are very valuable and equitable for other folks around the globe. And then you use that to kind of cross pollinate the scholarship and then scale it up. And then you can buy more education resources. And it's like the scholarship becomes this funnel and this piece to enable the system, but then the system starts to build roots of its own that allows these people to create value for themselves, for the economy, and for other folks that would hire them. And I thought, man, that's a really cool model. And again, I don't know if I forget where I heard this. I think it was probably at a meetup or something. So it was just sort of like spitballing in real time. But whoever pitched that to me, I hope they're executing that, because that sounds like such a cool model. And it sounds like you guys are sort of tapping into something similar to that. Maybe not one-to-one, but I'm seeing like a Venn diagram here that feels pretty strong, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe it was me who was pitching that to you. No,
Yeah.
but I think it's like, I think it's spot on, right? It's just taking a step back, looking at what Axie Infinity is actually accomplishing, whether it's explicitly or implicitly, and saying, wow, there's just something bigger going on here. There's going to be billions of people that will be using Web3 in the future. And so to be part of a ecosystem that will, in my opinion, be one of the largest transfers of this conduits of this transition, I think is just a blessing. And so I'm very thankful to be here and build a business around it too.
Yeah, for sure. How have you guys handled the bear market? And how have your scholars handled this bear market? And even like the SLP decline leading up to it, how did you communicate that? Like, do you feel like your scholars are pretty well versed on like Katana and the value of the DEX? Like, do any of your scholars put some of their earnings into like AXS staking, for example?
Yeah, so I guess we definitely want to make sure our scholars are very much aware of all of the ecosystem features that Axie Infinity has to offer, including like RON, staking, liquidity providing, just at least understanding the kind of risks and benefits of both. And so a large part of like kind of our community is to actually have these kind of educational seminars, you could say. We even have like trivia questions where we give out Ron during our live streams, where it's like, hey, what does, give us like a snippet or a description of what liquidity providing is, or why is that necessary in a decentralized exchange. And so I would say from the participation aspect, it's very much emphasized like purposefully as well, because we want to make sure that they realize, our community that is, how early we are in these ecosystems and how important it is to participate in those different features. As for like the bear market, right? I think it's definitely been challenging for a lot of folks, but now it's kind of like, how can we look at things maybe with a realigned expectation, right? And so what we did personally in our guild was, how can we make sure these community members are all playing the game in a fresh way, right? The people who want to play the game, does that mean giving them upgraded Axies, fresh teams, reorganizing kind of community-driven tournaments, for example, really reinvigorating the emphasis around the game and the gameplay itself. So that's kind of what our focus has been.
Yeah, you touched on something there I'm super curious to unpack, because I've thought about the scholar lens, right? I've definitely tried to spend some time empathizing with what's the daily grind of the scholar look like, and how does that feel on sort of a scale of work versus play? Playing video games is fun, but when you're doing it every day and it's a grind, it can feel like a job. I've even felt that, just, hey, I want to push this limit in Dota 2 because I think I need that to prove to the world I'm a good, Dota commentator. It becomes like a job after a while, when 3 weeks in, you're like, I'm not making the progress I thought I was going to make. And that does become stressful. So I can very much empathize with ladder anxiety. I've felt it at many points across my career. And I think I would not enjoy playing Axie nearly as much if I didn't have basically unlimited access to kind of any Axie that I want. I mean, I can't afford to just buy the most meta Axies at any point in the time, just constantly. But within the realm of curiosity, I have a lot of leeway to breed and then try different things and, trade with my friends and try different meta compositions. If I didn't have 5 teams to choose from when I'm sitting down and playing, I don't think I would have that much fun. And I think there's a lot of scholars that have one team, and that is
Yeah.
their team, and that's it. I mean, maybe you get to trade out one or two Axies occasionally. Some scholarships have ways, I guess, you can build up to like trading one out or upgrading your team. I'm curious how you guys handle that, because as much as I want to say, yeah, a scholar should be able to keep it fresh, it becomes a logistical nightmare very quickly. And some scholars don't always know what's best. Where I've experienced this firsthand, where a scholar will request an Axie thinking it's an upgrade, and I go, no, that's actually not an upgrade. You know, this isn't better. And you know, it can be a teachable moment where you explain why, and maybe you realize they're misunderstanding a mechanic, or maybe the bracket they're stuck in, there's something different about their lens. But it is really hard, especially as you scale up into like thousands of scholars. You can't. It's just, what is it, a free for all of people trading Axies? Like, how do you guys approach this? How do you handle it?
Yeah, I mean, that was beautiful the way you described it, right? Where a scholar might be only participating in one of the many features that we as owners, asset owners, participate in very regularly. Breeding, trading, kind of having the access to modify our team composition to optimize our in-game earning or game experience. So I think at Pog, like we definitely look at this as a opportunity to try to craft a way for community members to become owners, right? So giving them a clear path towards that. And so you were kind of alluded to, like, what does that actually mean? How does that look like in practice? Well, the most easy way to digest this is like, well, the best players in our community will have kind of an easier time of having unlocked access and privilege to these kind of activities, right? Whether that
Is that
be
like highest MMR when you say best players, generally
so
speaking?
highest MMR, most helpful in terms of coaching or consistency. So it kind of goes down the list as terms of like what is the most quantifiable, measurable way we can identify things, and then what are like the more softer skills that we can appreciate and reward for kind of just as a nod towards like, hey, you're on the right track. This is very value aligned to what we're doing. Keep on going, and we want you to be here in the long run. And
So
as
you guys have like an internal Axie score, kind of. You have almost like a Pog score where it's like MMR is one piece, but other contributions are factored in. It's like an internal MMR.
yeah, you can
I love
almost
that,
think
dude.
about it like that. Yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
like
I think that's awesome.
very much like holistic, right? Trying to look at it from because at the end of the day, it's just more than being a great player, right? We want people that are representative of not only our guild but the Lunacy as a whole, right? And so when we think about like our growing relationship with the other community members outside of Pog and then Sky and Mavis as well, we really want to craft this digital nation with people who are understanding of what the task is at hand and how long the journey will be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so definitely trying to incentivize those people to stick around for the long term.
That's incredible. Yeah. How about graduating? Like, how do you handle that? Is it something scalable where they can kind of become part of the community still, and then kind of onboard scholars under your umbrella? Do they graduate completely? How do you guys kind of handle that stuff?
So it's an ongoing process as the game kind of evolves, I would say. Right before we had a very clear path to graduation prior to like the SLP changes. And now as we're exploring these SLP changes, we're kind of waiting for, I guess, a more consistent way to kind of look at the parameters and then like really come up with a really robust system afterwards. But I think the broader question is like, how can people participate if they're not scholars? And I think that's something that we're very much focused on as well. Is we
Mm.
look at scholarships as like an optionality to participate in the Pog community as a whole. And even then, I think that can be extrapolated towards how we look at Axie Infinity. Like one way to participate in the ecosystem is by just playing the game, but you can create alongside the game. You can create content. You can write. You can draw. You can be a manager. You can be a breeder. You can be a collector. So I think doubling down on these different archetypes, seeing and appreciating why people come and vibe with their tribe and serving those needs is something that we're always exploring at POG, and we want to make sure we're doing
Mhm.
very well.
Well, and I think everything you described is spot on, but I think there's going to be even more than that. Like in my bias lens, right, the esports side, there's a ton of infrastructure around that. And being an Axie specialist and having skills is definitely very useful. Being a commentator, I guess we don't need observers in this case, but we'll have events where like camera operators and all this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, there will be major events where we'll hire professional production teams, but there's going to be a lot of online events that will be set up just like this with OBS and webcams and at-home microphones, and that's the kind of stuff where there's a lot of opportunities for remote production, and these are all kind of like gig economy type opportunities that will exist within the Axie sphere. And I think that's part of the vision of this current esports grant, to try to bring in more of the different languages covering each tournament that we're supporting, because it creates more opportunities for people to just practice. If we put that requirement in there, now people have to talk to each other that previously didn't really have to talk to each other. We just created a great icebreaker for a lot of influencers across the community that speak totally different languages, are in tune with totally different cultures. And I love seeing that cross-pollination. And we're at the very beginning of this grant, so we'll see how this experiment goes. But so far, I think it's been pretty good. We had some decent viewership on the Filipino stream covering a South American tournament the other day. And I think that's like a really good sign that there's just a hunger for Axie in general. And I think esports is going to enable more opportunities for people to contribute without actually playing the game. In the terms of creating content, like writing is going to be huge. We're going to need some Axie journalism, man. Soon there's going to be so many tournaments going on. We're going to need people to curate this stuff and write up summaries or do video. Like, how about podcasting? Like, there's no Axie esports podcast yet. There hasn't been enough esports content to warrant one until like kind of now or in the very near future. So all this is just very exciting to me. And again, esports is just one vertical within the Axie sphere. Wait until we have some of these other games popping up and land is out there. It starts to balloon a lot more than just this arena battle game with cards,
You mentioned esports, so it's kind of cute, right? We have our own little, I guess you could call it esports grant in POG. So we actually ask our own community members to propose their own ideas in a similar way that Sky Mavis did for their esports grant proposal. And we actually just had our first one executed yesterday, and the finals will be tomorrow. But it's really cool because we're giving community members a complete autonomy, absolutely no micromanagement in terms of the organization, the execution, the distribution, the advertisement of these activities. And I think like it's something that we learned a lot from Sky Mavis in terms of what sort of activities can we quote decentralize, and what is like the sphere of impact that we're willing to kind of offer to the community as a whole. And we looked at skills like the ability to coordinate tournaments and the ability to cast tournaments and the ability to broadcast as core to being part of this ecosystem in the long run. So it's kind of cute. Like we have this thing called POG Elites, and what can happen is folks can essentially sign up to play each other one-on-one on the Discord with like a public kind of in a public way where other people can spectate. But coupled to that, we also have people who can sign up to be casters as well. So we're creating this like underground kind of like competitive fight club, you can imagine.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's really cool.
No, that's great. That organic stuff is absolutely fantastic. I mean, I think we have to decentralize the approach just like we did with scholarships. When you look at the amount of viewership esports is getting right now relative to the amount of players that we have, even at like the 1.8 million DAUs or something since we've turned off the rewards for adventure, there's still a lot of people that are competing hard in arena that are not consuming any esports content. And I think there's a big gap there. And if there's a financial incentive to perform better in Axie and you can't afford private one-on-one coaching, what better way than to watch the professional players and have casters at the very least explain what's going on? Even if you don't have those Axies, there's probably still something you can learn about the play style in terms of how often they pass their turn or the way they play their cards in different combos, and just the way the games unfold. It's really interesting to see how the best of the best approach the game relative to yourself. And I think the kind of events that you're doing are what give people a little taste of that competitive excitement. Even if you get eliminated in one of the early rounds, you were part of it, and you understand that storyline, and that compels you to want to see how the rest of the story unfolds. So you're more likely to tune into the stream, even if it's a little like local stream in the Discord only with community members. That's still a really cool thing that activates the feedback loop of this is what competition is all about, and this is why being a fan of these competitors is really, really fun. And I think that psychology just scales basically into what traditional sports are, these giant fandoms of, as we have like AxieCon finals, plural, imagine like AxieCon 5, you bet your ass we're going to have some pretty cool storylines by then, dude. We're going to have some great rivalries. I think just inevitably throughout this thing, Indes might have a run, but one day the king will fall. And then what's going to happen, man? A new king will rise, or maybe a queen. Better yet, right? So anyway, sorry, I digress. I'm stealing the show here, but you got me all excited about esports and the future of like the opportunities it's going to create in this space, man. It's going to be a whole gig economy. It's so cool. Project managers, man, we're going to need a ton of them.
For sure. I mean, AxieCon when? That's my question. Do you guys have plans for that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. For sure. I think AxieCon is something that we've thought about for a long time, and it's always been like a really exciting prospect. And we're just finally at the point where we have a team that is big enough to really start thinking about executing. Obviously, COVID times have made real like physical events at scale challenging, but not impossible. There's been a ton of meetups. ETH Denver just happened. We've run some smaller scale meetups that were very successful. So I think we've got a good enough data set to confirm that like it's time for AxieCon. I think the hunger is there. We need to make this happen. And I'm really excited about it. It's really cool to see the team get to the point where we can seriously take this from, hey, that would be a cool idea, to, okay, let's take some of the first steps and figure this stuff out. So I'm really excited to make announcements on that front, but I got nothing for you right now, man. It's
I'm like it being part of the community for like several months before attending a real live event was just very different. Like the reality of how impactful this community was didn't hit me until I came to NYC NFT and met people like you, Chuck, Jihos, and the rest of the community members. And I think that was what catalyzed kind of like my efforts in Web3 and Axie specifically, right? It's just to see, it's just totally different to interact with people online and then see them in person, look at them eye to eye, and be like, yeah, we're on the same wavelength. We think that this is something way bigger than it is today, and we can't wait to build together for that journey, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't always translate online. Sometimes it just seems like people are being blindly positive or just shilling on Twitter, but it's different when you have that conversation in real life and you realize, oh, this guy's not shilling. He's just really excited and passionate about this concept the same way I am. And the reason I'm here is the same reason he's here, and he's here. And you're in a room with 300 people and you're like, that's why they're all here. Wow. And then things start to click. And you're exactly right. I mean, I had the exact same experience where, it was all online. And then all of a sudden we started doing those meetups like kind of towards the end of last year. And it completely changed my lens. So I feel that energy a lot.
Yeah, I think like it's also, we're in a really unique time, I think, with just Axie in general. I think when we look at historically speaking, like what has happened so far, and the catalytic event known as Origin that's kind of looming ahead of us. I think the builders in the space who doubled down on their efforts during these next 2 months will really reap the rewards. I think when we talk about, I mean, in my head, I'm imagining 1 out of every 2, maybe 1 out of every 3 Axie players will be playing before Origin release, and the majority of them will be coming after Origin this year. So these are a whole new population to basically address and onboard and educate and provide content for and communities for. So I think like when we think about like what do people want to build right now, and like it's focusing on these newcomers and seeing what needs they will have, anticipating those needs, I think is a really good way to spend your time.
Yeah, totally. These are really interesting times. I think well put and very unique. Knowing that we're going from 4-part Axie battles to 6-part Axie battles, this really is a unique transition. As I've joked before, it's not like Axies are just going to suddenly sprout, 2 more parts and we're going to 8-part battles. It's not arbitrary change just for the sake of it as much as it's the next iteration of the game. This is kind of how alphas work. You put something out there, you gather a bunch of feedback, and you implement it. You improve the stuff that's good, you tone down or remove the stuff that's not so good, and you slowly move this big ship into the right direction. And I think now that we've released so much more like content about it, now that we've confirmed that random crits are going away, for example, like that's something that I've known for a long time, that I've kind of teased a little bit, but I haven't had that green light to really talk about. And I think this Fury like rage system I think it's just an objective improvement. It's just of the way to do crits, this is a much more balanced and competitive version compared to the totally random, let's roll some dice thing that we have right now. And that is just one of many examples of why I'm so excited about Origin. It just feels like the next big change. So so much so that a lot of Axie teams are going to have to be replaced. And that's why I think Origin's launch will be a breeding event in and of itself, because folks like yourself, you're going to have to replace a lot of Axies on those lineups, right? And that's expected and understood, and it's going to take time as the meta evolves, and that's kind of exciting. But there's going to be a lot of Axies to be bred. There's going to be a big quest to like crack the meta and find the new combos and then test them in real time and see what's good. And that's the like. Origin is only going to be revealed for the first time one time, like that's going to be a cataclysmic event that I think makes this timing so unique. So I don't want to overhype it. I feel like I'm overhyping right now, but I shouldn't say cataclysmic. That's a big word. Anyway, do you feel similarly though? Am I just hyped up because you're like talking about all the stuff I'm so excited about here? Or
I mean, it's just one. I think what adds a lot of gasoline to our excitement is like these updates that we get from the devs, right? Just seeing the insight, the design decisions, the final output, them being, I think, this trend that we've seen in general of this communication about all aspects of the game in terms of just game releases, game update, kind of vision, broader things, addressing even the most painful aspects of the game, like the kind of re-emphasis of this is a game first, and earning is a consequence of player-owned property rights and basically community-owned economies. But it's just this whole aspect, I think, is a vector that is only going to point towards success, right? The more open the devs are with the community, I think the more excited we can be as a community about the progress of the game and the fact that we're creating alongside of it. So I think it's totally natural to be this excited. I've seen the dev update as well, and I mean, what excites me a lot in particular is this free to play aspect. I think we're going to finally see people who want to be part of the ecosystem because they really love the game, and they'll have a very measurable way to show how much they love the game. And it's going to really, I think, change the way we look at onboarding into Axie in general. I think I can't anticipate the future, but previously scholarships were a huge way to onboard people into Axie. I'm wondering just how free to play will maybe supplement the scholarship model. Will it complement or maybe even overtake? I don't know, but I think it shows that like we're very early, and adapting alongside this growth is super important for guilds and other kinds of groups.
Yeah. I think we definitely have to get the calibration right on these free Axies. That's going to be a key part in terms of balancing their power relative to the blockchain NFT Axies that we play with right now. But I agree with you entirely. I think giving this measurable way for someone to have this scholarship resume, say, hey, look, I've won 100 battles, or like, look, I've played with X comp. Even just to be able to say, hey, I've played with this composition. I'm very comfortable with poison teams. Please give me a poison team because I've studied it and I know how to play it, and I can verify that by my match history on the blockchain. That's really cool. And I guess technically that match history is not on the blockchain, but you still get what I'm saying. It's a really cool concept, and that is a really powerful onboarding vehicle, and it's a powerful training ground. I mean, I remember during the big Axie boom seeing people printing out the cards and then using that as kind of a training ground to get used to playing the game when they didn't have access, and that's a whole nother level of like dedication. And now this really makes that concept very fluid and a very straightforward experience. So yeah, you totally. I think it's going to bring in a whole new wave of players that understandably were hesitant to just open up the wallet and start buying Axies without having an opportunity to try it. I think all of us have gone through that experience of, you buy that first set of Axies, you think it's perfect, and before long you realize, there's something about these Axies that doesn't quite add up, and you realize that you had some misjudgment somewhere because it is really, really hard to know exactly the nuances of the game when you haven't had an opportunity to play the game. It's not the same as just watching YouTube videos. It's like driving somewhere versus being a passenger and trying to remember the directions. It's just a totally different experience.
I see it especially helpful for me to pitch the idea to my American friends or my North American friends, right? So it's like before I had to actually have to give them a scholarship essentially, right? Which is like an economic decision almost. Like, am I going to spend this money to maybe get to my friend who might play once or twice, or like just tell them to download the app through the APK or whatever distribution channels available, and just going to play right away. I think is just super important for the growth of this game.
Definitely. So let's get into some real talk, dude. We're getting, towards the second half of this thing. What's grinding your gears right now? What do we need to fix? What makes Mystic mad? What keeps you up at night, man? Hit me with some real honest criticism here.
Yeah. So I think first of all, so I guess we could just not candy code it and go right in, right? It's kind of well, I'm. Origin is very clearly going to be the thing that we will use to drive content for the foreseeable future, and I think that's clear. And from the messaging that Sky Mavis is providing, I think what gets me very excited about the game is this concept of just land gameplay, right? And I was wondering, is there a way the community can be more involved in the development of land? And so an idea that I was bouncing around in my head was that could I, for example, stake my land in a year or 2 year lockup period and be kind of as a commitment to show Sky Mavis, hey, I'm here for the long run. I want to participate in the development of land in a more meaningful way. So I think just kind of working on these long-term projects where there isn't a clear communication channel directly, understandably so, because this might be very far off in the future, but at least opening it up into ways where, hey, if you want to show kind of your long-term commitment towards these particular aspects of the game, we want you to have privileged access to these things, so that way you can even help shape the way we think about these things, and obviously in a way that's acceptable for the developers as well. And I'm just that's something that I would love to see more from Sky Mavis in general. So I think examples of that as to how it can be applied today, with what the experiment that Jiho put out about propose your balance changes, right? I think that's super important. Give the opportunity for those who are thoughtful, who are committed to that particular vertical of the game, the voice that they need to kind of influence or express their sentiment around that. So just kind of looking at different verticals and axes looking to pursue alongside the community and kind of dive into that. And I think we've seen examples like this with the Builders Program, the technical one and the esports grant. So I see it happening, but I'm just very excited. And obviously, as a consumer, I'm asking when next. But we know these.
No, so I think I understand exactly where you're getting at here, and I think really, if I can try to summarize, what you're saying is we need to build more and faster towards this Axie DAO mentality, right? Like that kind of timeline is looming, and the more we can try to build with community in mind and towards this collaborative, who are the natural community leaders, be it by virtue of merit through ideas or through contribution, or maybe just through amount of assets. If you have 400 land plots, that probably means you have some opinions and you're pretty invested in the space, right? So there's a lot of different things that we can balance. I agree with you about the balance changes and this experiment to really start implementing some of that feedback. I think that's key. You know, again, from my anecdotal bias lens, that was the pivotal moment that started making Dota a real game. The developer that's still the lead on it, IceFrog, it bounced around a lot of different developers before it got into his hands. The thing that he did so different was hey, here's my email, icefrog@gmail.com. Send me any ideas you have about Dota, and just created a funnel to channel all of this community energy into something. And obviously there's a lot of bad ideas and you can't read every single idea, but having that data is the starting point. The next step is finding a good way to organize it and sift through it and then distill something meaningful. But it clearly accelerated the rate of the development, the depth of the game, and allowed for way more ideas to be implemented. So absolutely, man, I am 100% bullish on that. And fundamentally, it's fucking why I'm here. That's why I left the Web 2 space in Dota to come to this Web 3 space and build something that is collaborative in nature, is built with community in mind, and has all these incentives for like a meritocracy to like naturally kind of thrive in this sort of system. So I think that is really cool. So this is a little long-winded, but so I think for Origin and for like V2, it's a little bit easier, like because V2 has so much history behind it. We're in season 20, you know, so now it's not delicate. It's at this point where little tweaks can, well, okay, delicate isn't the right word, but like little tweaks can make a big difference. You know, we don't need to do huge card reworks, and the game isn't horribly broken. It's like, hey, we need to fix these core things. Okay, now we've got it into a pretty good state. I think Land has been in this this development stage where too many cooks can be really tricky, and it needs to get maybe another step down the line before it's ready for that kind of like, hey guys, test this thing and give us some feedback, and then we're going to implement it. So I think your head's in the right place. I love where your energy is, and we need to build with that in mind. I think for Land specifically, we just got to get it a little more complete, and then we can start taking steps towards that. But totally. I'm a little scared to think about what that would look like, knowing how many landholders there are and how opinionated some of them are. My gosh, that would be an interesting council to try to moderate. I'm not against it, but whew, that would get real spicy real quick. So I love it. You're making that face like, hell yeah, dude, bring on the spice. Let's get this political debate going. Because that's like, to me, Land inevitably goes into politics, right? Property rights. This is like inherently political. You know, these sorts of things are very interesting to me, and I'm excited for the debate, but it's a lot to unpack, you know?
No, I mean, it was just a brainstorm for sure, right? I think just
I love it.
alongside that direction. And then like just to maybe generalize it a bit further, right? In terms of what I think as a community and kind of as a partnership between the community and Sky Mavis that we can improve upon is like really appreciating the different archetypes of people entering the space and kind of understanding that they're all coming maybe for different reasons and kind of legitimizing their experience and their pathway. So for example, a scholar or somebody who's being lent NFT assets to play the game is looking at the ecosystem completely differently than someone who's doing it for pure curiosity versus just collectorship versus content creation. So I think just like it's a little I guess unclear as to where guilds fall into this whole ecosystem. And I think not obviously, but presumably this is because the ecosystem is under development. So it's really hard to say like, this is where you fit in, but just kind of acknowledging these things and allowing kind of a dialogue to be opened up and saying, hey, these core components of the system exist. Here's kind of how we view them initially, and here's how like we see this looking in the future. What are your thoughts, or what are your ideas? Yeah,
I think I agree. I think the first step towards something like this is trying to build out what I would call like committees or councils in these different targeted ways. Like I think I've mentioned this before. Maybe this is a leak, but either way, here you go. I'm intending on trying to build a, quote, competitive integrity council. I think the situation around New Year's with the win trading proves that this stuff is complicated. There's always going to be different like levels of like questionable behavior, and like how do we judge what's unethical and what isn't when some of these things are in a gray area or on the line. How do we calibrate punishments? We need to get away from, hey, somebody at Sky Mavis just decides, ban his Axies for 30 days, and into something that's more collaborative, with a council that has some sort of equitable representation of different regions, different cultures, different languages, slightly different skill sets. I need to figure out how to structure this council, and it'll probably start with a majority of Sky Mavis people, and then slowly they'll be replaced with more community members. Like, it has to have a strategy that kind of ramps up over time. Like everything else, it starts centralized and becomes more decentralized over time. But that's what we're building towards. So again, I'm at like the planning phase of trying to figure this out, because I want to get it right. We can't just throw something out there. But that's where I'm trying to take these sorts of things, where it's best if the community decides. Just like we've committed now, once the season starts, changes don't happen. And if there is some crazy bug or some game-breaking combo that does somehow pop up in the middle of the season, we'll take it to some sort of community conversation, vote, dialogue, and try to make a decision based on whatever the community consensus is for the right decision. Because it's a decision either way, right? To do something or not to do something. Either leave it as is or do some sort of a last minute change. So
I have complete faith. I mean, just seeing the the trajectory that Sky Mavis has taken over the last 5 or 6 months, I think is just a testament towards like how they view the community, right? Just even this talk today with Axie Tuesday, I think more and more activities like this is definitely. I can't wait to see what else is in store for us.
Yeah, it's all about exchange of ideas, right? I think that's like the solution to a lot of these really big problems. And we might not have all the solutions today, but we definitely chip away at them by putting some spotlight on them and using our collaborative effort at problem solving. I think that's a really powerful thing. And we're starting to see maybe even more than the tip of the iceberg of that in the Axie space now, with all these different ways. Like we're seeing a lot of energy on Twitter, and even those suggestions to update the economy, like seeing community members step up and suggest different ways to calibrate things, and being able to utilize some of that and act on that advice. That's a really powerful thing, man. I don't think there's too many games where that kind of an exchange happens like that. I don't know. I don't want to like toot my own horn or something, since I guess I'm on the development team, but it was pretty powerful to see that exchange in public on Twitter for all to see, for anyone with a Twitter account to chime in on or retweet or engage with. That really is powerful.
And I think it's clear, like with the hiring of like Phil and just like that public announcement and his ability to communicate with the community immediately and provide this instant feedback. I mean, the community's hungry for this, right? They are not only like in the truest sense, they are invested in the game, and we're very excited for the future. I think it's awesome.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Totally give us some shout outs of where everybody can find you, find more about POG. Are you guys bringing on more scholars? Are you continuing to expand? Are you waiting for Origin to really start the next round of expansion? Anything you can tell us about the future? Any POG leaks you got for us here, Mr. Mystic?
Yeah, so I mentioned before that we are looking at another household organization to merge with. So you'll be getting the official announcements around that in the next week or so. So very excited about that.
All right.
Lots of stuff is happening behind the scenes. We're kind of closing on our fundraising round to make sure we inject that investment into our community and really create these like positive sum value creators and asset owners. We're very excited for the future of that. As far as where you can find more of me, I'm on Twitter, twitter.com/mystic_scholars. I tweet all things Axie, so very much proud to be a Lunassian, and I'm thankful to be here today.
Beautiful. Love it. Folks, you can find most of those links here in the description of the YouTube video as well, where many people will watch. But definitely want to thank everyone for joining us today for another Axie Tuesday. As a quick reminder, we do these every other Tuesday. So keep an eye out. Make sure you follow Axie Infinity on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and everywhere else. You know where to find it. It's just Axie Infinity. We've got it all. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. Very much looking forward to what you guys have in store, and absolutely love that shirt, by the way. I think that's the first time you've sat back. That is beautiful. Love it, my friend.
Yep. Appreciate it, Zyori. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. All right. We'll catch you next time, everyone. Remember, Axie hard.